Imagine breaking your arm. You head to the hospital, you get an X-ray, and you're just sitting there looking at this black and white monitor.
Right, just waiting for the doctor to tell you what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And you see the jagged white line right across the bone, and the doctor just points and says, well, there it is. There's the fracture.
it's right there.
Yeah, the diagnosis is physical, it's objective, and it is undeniably out there in the world for anyone to verify. We really love that kind of precision.
Oh, absolutely. We crave it.
But what happens when you attempt to diagnose or even just locate the very mind that is looking at the X-ray?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's where it all falls apart.
Right. You step into the actual subjective experience of being alive, and suddenly that whole diagnostic machinery completely fails.
It shatters entirely.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you transition from looking at an object in the world, a bone, a tree, maybe a cell, under a microscope, to trying to isolate the subject itself.
The one doing the looking.
Exactly. The diagnostic waters become infinitely murky because the thing you are trying to observe is the exact same mechanism you are attempting to observe with. You're basically trying to catch the catcher.
And that ultimate dizzying mystery is exactly where we're going today. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive into the source material you've provided.
It's a fantastic topic.
It really is. We are setting out on a very specific and, frankly, deeply personal mission for you, the listener. Usually, we analyze historical events or dissect economic trends or whatever. But today, we are diving into a profoundly fascinating excerpted chapter titled The Witness.
Written by Joe Bandra.
Yes, by Joe Bandra. We are exploring the ultimate mystery of human existence, our own consciousness. We are going hunting for that elusive observer behind the eyes.
Good luck with that hunt, right?
Seriously.
Yeah.
But the reason this matters, the reason you listening right now should care about this, is because every single thing you value, every person you love, every fear you hold, it all exists entirely within this invisible space of your awareness.
Yeah, the source text is just remarkable. It's this dense, really rigorously philosophical examination of identity.
But it's not preachy, right?
No, not at all. It doesn't ask you to adopt a new belief system or anything. Rather, it just asks you to relentlessly question the assumptions you already hold about who and what you fundamentally are.
Which is uncomfortable sometimes.
Definitely. I mean, we walk around every day with this implicit assumption that there's a me driving the vehicle of our body, looking out through the windshield of our eyes.
Right. Like a little pilot up there.
Exactly. And Joe Bandra takes that deeply ingrained assumption and systematically dismantles it.
It's an investigation that just strips away all the conceptual layers until we are left with the raw mechanics of experiencing. So let's just jump straight into the most immediate puzzle the text presents.
The invisibility of the observer.
Yes. It points out this incredibly strange, almost paradoxical feature of daily human experience. You can perceive virtually anything in the known universe except the one thing that is doing the perceiving.
Right. To illustrate this, the text asks us to perform a very simple, immediate inventory of our conscious experience.
Okay, let's do it.
So consider your physical body. You can examine your hands. You can hold them up right now. Observe the geometry of the lines on your palms. Feel the joints moving. Sense the temperature of the skin.
Yeah, I'm looking at my hand right now.
Right. And because you can observe them, your hands are objects appearing within your awareness. They are the known, not the knower.
That makes perfect sense on a physical level. I mean, I am aware of my hands, therefore I am not exclusively my hands.
Exactly. You could lose a hand and still be you.
Right. But the text pushes this inward, which is where it gets a lot trickier. It says you can also examine your internal psychological states.
Precisely. So you can notice a thought arising out of nowhere, like a sudden memory of an embarrassing moment from high school, or even just a calculation about what to make for dinner.
Oh yeah, those hit me all the time.
Right. And you can observe an emotion welling up in your chest. Maybe the tightness of anxiety or the expansiveness of joy.
Okay, so I'm watching the emotion happen.
Yes. Because you can observe these mental and emotional phenomena, they too are objects in your awareness. They are not the knower either.
I mean, you can even step back and observe your own personality traits. You can catch yourself in a conversation and think, wow, I am being incredibly defensive right now.
We've all been there.
Or, I'm relying on my humor as a crutch here. You are literally witnessing your own psychological defense mechanisms in real time.
Which means you aren't them. Every time you identify something, a thought, a feeling, a trait, you are, by definition, separating yourself from it.
You are the subject looking at an object.
Exactly. But as the text reveals, there's one thing that absolutely refuses to stand still long enough to be placed on that observation table,
Yeah.
and that is the knower itself.
The entity that is allegedly possessing and processing all of these experiences. And this is where we run into what I think is one of the most brilliant parts of the text, because Bandra introduces this brilliant analogy of a flashlight to explain the structural impossibility of self-observation.
I love this analogy. It perfectly captures it.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener, because this analogy really clarifies the mechanics of the problem. Imagine a powerful flashlight in a pitch-black forest, and it is tasked with the mission of finding its own beam.
Right. So the flashlight is an incredibly effective tool for illuminating the external world. It can sweep across a dark clearing and instantly reveal the textures of the tree bark.
It can shine out into the distance and illuminate a whole mountain.
Yeah, it brings everything it touches out of the darkness and into clear visibility. The light reveals the intricate details of whatever is in its path.
But the light itself remains structurally invisible to itself. I mean, the beam can reveal the trees, the ground, the dust in the air, but it cannot turn 180 degrees and illuminate its own bulb.
It just can't. The one thing the light cannot shine upon is its own source.
And this maps perfectly onto how consciousness operates. I mean, everything you have ever experienced has appeared within consciousness.
Right. The sound of our voices coming through your speakers or headphones right now, that is appearing within your consciousness.
The feeling of the chair supporting your weight, the ambient temperature of the room, it is all illuminated by the light of your awareness.
Yet consciousness itself never appears as an illuminated object. You just can't put a boundary around it.
It's exactly like trying to use your smartphone's camera to take a picture of its own lens without using a mirror. I mean, it can capture the whole world, but completely misses itself.
That is an excellent modern translation of the concept. The camera lens is just a void in the image it produces.
It can capture reality in stunning 4K definition. A chaotic city street, a microscopic organism, billions of pixels of data about the external world. But the singular mechanism that makes the photograph possible is permanently excluded from the photograph.
It's permanently out of frame.
Mm-hmm.
And consider how intensely frustrating this structural limitation must have been for early philosophers and scientists.
Oh, it must have driven them crazy.
Absolutely. The entire foundation of Western empirical inquiry is based on the idea that if something exists, it can be isolated, measured, and objectively studied.
But the observer refuses to be isolated. You have these brilliant historical minds sitting in their studies, trying to grab hold of the core of their own existence to find this fundamental I.
And every time they reach for it, they just grab a handful of passing thoughts.
Because they're looking for an object. Right.
Exactly. They were looking for a noun.
Mm-hmm.
But as the text points out, everything they successfully isolated was merely another experience. They could never locate the experiencer.
This philosophical roadblock leads us perfectly into the historical context provided in the text. Since this knower is so perpetually elusive, how did history's greatest minds try to corner it?
Well, the text brings in the 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume.
Yes, Hume. He famously took a sledgehammer to our assumptions about identity.
He really did. Hume was a radical empiricist. He believed that all human knowledge had to stem directly from sensory experience, so he conducted this legendary introspective experiment.
What did he do?
He decided he was going to look inward, bypass all the external sensory data, and finally locate this core, unchanging self that supposedly unified his existence.
So he just sat there and searched his own mind.
Relentlessly. He turned his attention inward and tried to locate the exact coordinate of David Hume.
And after all that rigorous introspection, he essentially reported back that the self was a complete ghost. He couldn't find it.
He came up completely empty-handed regarding a permanent self. What's fascinating here is his famous bundle theory of the self, which the text explored.
Right, the bundle theory.
Yeah, Hume wrote that whenever he entered most intimately into what he called himself, he always stumbled upon some particular perception or other.
Like what?
He found a feeling of heat or cold. He found a spark of light or a shadow, a feeling of love or hatred, pain or pleasure.
Basically, he found a cascading waterfall of changing data.
Exactly that, a constant flowing bundle of perceptions succeeding one another with inconceivable rapidity.
But no actual self holding it all?
Right. He argued that he never, at any point, caught himself independent of a perception. He found the contents of the mind, but no container.
No underlying substance holding it all together, no permanent owner of the experiences.
No psychological CEO sitting behind the eyes, managing operations, filing the memories, and directing the emotions. The control room is just empty.
Okay, I have to push back on Hume here, and I want to pose this directly to you, the listener. If there is truly no CEO managing operations up there in your head, who exactly is listening to this deep dive right now?
It's a fair question.
Right. Who is translating the English vocabulary we are speaking into coherent meaning? If it's just a chaotic bundle of perceptions, how is there any comprehension?
That is the exact counterargument that critics of Hume have raised for centuries. If there is only a bundle of perceptions, who is doing the bundling?
Exactly.
But Hume, and the contemplative traditions that Bandra draws upon, would argue that if you look closely at this exact moment of listening, you don't actually find a listener. You only find the process of listening.
Wait. Explain the difference between finding a listener and finding the process of listening.
Okay, so if you dissect your current reality, you find the auditory sensation of the sound waves hitting your eardrum.
Sure.
Simultaneously, you might find a feeling of intellectual curiosity arising, and a millisecond later, you might find a cognitive thought that says, "Oh, I disagree with this," or "This makes perfect sense."
Okay, I'm following.
These are all independent phenomena occurring in rapid succession. The illusion of the listener is just a post hoc narrative your brain constructs to tie all these rapid-fire experiences together.
Ah, so it's a story we tell ourselves after the fact.
Yes, the thinker doesn't create the thought. The thought arises, and then the brain claims ownership of it after the fact.
Wow, so it's like walking into a massive, bustling corporate headquarters. You see all this incredible work getting done, thousands of emails are being sent, high-level meetings in conference rooms, products shipping out.
It looks incredibly coordinated.
But if you take the elevator up to the top floor and kick open the door to the CEO's office, the room is empty. There isn't even a desk.
Just an empty room.
Yeah, the company is running entirely on automated systems, departmental communication, and localized reactions, but there is no central dictator running the show.
That is a highly accurate representation of the decentralized nature of our psychology. But, it understandably triggers a massive philosophical headache.
And a lot of existential dread, frankly.
Oh, definitely. Because if Hume is right, if there is no permanent CEO, no unchanging core self, how do we explain the undeniable, deeply visceral feeling that we are the exact same person we were 20 years ago?
Yes. Because my subjective reality is that I possess continuity. I remember being a kid and breaking my arm on the playground.
Right, the X-ray from the intro.
Exactly. I feel in my bones that I am the exact same subject who experienced that pain, not some completely different bundle of perceptions. So how does psychological continuity exist if the underlying structure is just a constantly changing river of passing thoughts?
To solve this apparent contradiction, the text offers a really highly effective analogy regarding the illusion of continuity. It asks us to consider a corporation, let's call it, for the sake of the analogy, Zenith Dynamics.
Zenith Dynamics. Okay. Let's say it was founded in the year 2000.
Okay, Zenith Dynamics is founded in 2000. Now, fast forward 20 or 30 years to the present day. What has actually happened in the physical and structural reality of that company?
Well, things have changed.
Drastically. The visionary founders who started it, they've retired or been forced out. The original employees have all turned over.
The physical headquarters. They probably outgrew it and moved to a completely different start.
Exactly. The technology they use is entirely different. They went from filing cabinets and physical servers to entirely cloud-based infrastructure.
Their internal corporate culture has shifted. Their target demographic is entirely new. Even their core product line, maybe they started making hardware and now they only sell software subscriptions.
Yes. Literally every single physical, conceptual, and personnel component of the company has been replaced.
It's essentially the corporate equivalent of the ship of Theseus, right? If you replace every plank of wood on a ship, is it still the same ship?
It's the exact same paradox.
Ah.
20 years later, Zenith Dynamics shares almost zero physical or structural reality with the company founded in 2000.
Well, we still call it Zenith Dynamics.
Exactly. The legal system, The stock market, the employees, the customers, they all treat it as a single, continuous, uninterrupted entity. Why? Because the label provides continuity where the underlying reality is one of constant replacement.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. The text applies this directly to human identity. The contents of our lives, our biological selves, our deeply held beliefs, our daily habits, our emotional baselines, they undergo this exact same total replacement.
Constantly.
Biologically, nearly every cell in my body has regenerated since I was a child. Psychologically, I completely reject some of the core beliefs I held a decade ago.
As you should.
Right. My preferences, my fears, my entire operating system has been upgraded or rewritten. But the sense of continuity, that label of I, it remains stubbornly glued to the front of the building.
We use the word I as a verbal and conceptual shorthand. It is a necessary fiction to group together a loosely affiliated, constantly changing collection of thoughts, memories, and physical matter.
Like a trademark.
Yes, just like the trademark, Zenith Dynamics groups together a changing collection of people and products so they can sign contracts and open bank accounts. The label I allows us to navigate society, take responsibility for our past actions, and plan for the future.
But it is deeply comforting to forget it's just a label. We desperately want to believe there is a solid, unchanging, monolithic me at the center of the storm.
We really do.
Even as our beliefs undergo massive renovations, we cling to the corporate trademark of our identity. It gives us a sense of grounding in a psychological reality that is, in truth, incredibly fluid and unmoored.
It's a vital survival mechanism. But the text doesn't let us rest there in the philosophical realm. When we transition from abstract 18th century philosophy to modern 21st century science, we find that the physical architecture of the brain completely destroys any remaining hope for that monolithic CEO.
Wait, really? Science confirms Hume.
Yes, neuroscience actually complicates the issue even further, confirming Hume's suspicions on a biological level.
You'd think that with the advent of fMRI scans and advanced neuroimaging, science would have finally cornered the observer.
You'd hope so.
You'd think a neuroscientist could point to a brightly lit cluster of neurons on a scan and say, ah, there it is. The self is located precisely in the left prefrontal cortex, right between the language center and the memory vault.
But that biological control room is exactly what we do not find. The text dives into how the brain contains no obvious headquarters. There is no anatomical executive office where all the data converges for a tiny homunculus to view it.
So if there's no central viewer, how is the brain actually structured to process reality?
It is spectacularly decentralized. The brain is an incredibly complex network of geographically separated, highly specialized modules.
Geographically separated inside the skull, you mean?
Right. For instance, the visual data you are taking in right now is being processed all the way at the back of your head in the occipital lobe.
Okay.
But the language you are comprehending is largely being processed in Wernicke's area on the left side of your brain.
Yeah.
Motor commands are originating from a completely different strip across the top.
And emotions.
Fear and emotional resonance are being calculated deep in the center, in the amygdala.
So the brain is less like a monarchy with a king on a throne and much more like a sprawling democracy or, I don't know, a massive parallel processing network where millions of local agents are just shouting at each other simultaneously.
Exactly. Which gives rise to one of the most famous puzzles in cognitive science, which the text highlights. It's called the binding problem.
The binding problem. Okay, what is that?
If the brain is a decentralized democracy of specialized processors, how do we experience a unified world? The text uses the analogy of an orchestra.
Oh, I like that.
You have the violins of the visual cortex, the heavy cellos of the emotional centers, the horns of the memory banks. They're all physically separated, playing their distinct, localized parts. But you don't hear a cacophony of isolated instruments playing in separate rooms.
No, I definitely don't experience the world as a disjointed stream of independent data. I mean, I am experiencing right now the unified, seamless symphony of sitting in this room, looking at my notes, hearing the tone of my own voice, feeling the ambient temperature, and generating analytical thoughts.
It feels like one singular high-definition reality.
Yeah, completely seamless.
That is the core of the binding problem.
Mm-hmm.
How does this scattered, decentralized network of wet biological wiring temporally bind the color red, the spherical shape, and the crisp sound of a bite into the singular, unified conscious experience of eating an apple?
So, wait. I need to push back on what this implies. If there is no central processing unit where the whole picture comes together, does that mean the unified self is quite literally just a side effect?
That's a huge question.
Is the feeling of being me just an illusion generated when all these different brain systems synchronize their firing patterns?
If we connect this to the bigger picture in cognitive science, many theorists lean exactly toward that conclusion. The text explores how theories like global workspace theory suggest the brain acts like a massive theater.
A theater.
Yeah, unconscious processors compete for access to the bright spotlight on stage. When a piece of information, say a loud noise or a sudden pain, wins the competition and gets broadcast to the rest of the brain, we experience that as conscious awareness.
Oh, wow. So the self isn't a thing, it's just the ongoing broadcast.
Exactly, is an emergent property. The text explicitly notes that while science has theories about neural oscillations and gamma waves binding the data, the hard problem of exactly how physical matter generates subjective experience remains an absolute mystery.
It's astonishing that we walk around every day operating a machine that even our best scientists can't fully explain the internal reality of.
It's the great mystery of our time.
But this brings us to a really crucial distinction the text makes. And it's one that moves us out of abstract science and back into our immediate moment-to-moment experience.
Right, getting back to what it actually feels like.
If the brain is an orchestra playing a massive symphony of data, how do we end up only hearing specific parts of the music at any given time? This is the vital difference between attention and awareness.
This is a critical pivot in the argument, and this is where we see one of Bandra's most profound insights. We often conflate attention and awareness, but they operate very differently.
Okay, let's start with attention.
The text describes attention as highly mobile and selective. Right now, your attention is tasked with listening to our voices, processing the concepts we are discussing.
But 10 minutes ago, your attention might have briefly flashed to an itch on your face or a worry about an upcoming meeting.
Exactly. Attention moves constantly. The text compares it to a high-powered spotlight wandering across a vast, dark stage. Wherever that spotlight of attention lands, that specific experience becomes incredibly vivid and dominant, while everything else just fades into the background darkness.
Yes. Think about the modern phenomenon of doom scrolling on your phone. You can be sitting in a bustling coffee shop, music playing, people talking, the smell of espresso in the air.
But you don't notice any of it.
None of it.
Yeah.
Your spotlight of attention narrows down entirely to a 3-inch screen. The political argument on Twitter or the video on Instagram becomes your entire subjective universe. The coffee shop practically ceases to exist in your consciousness.
I experience that all the time. Or, highway hypnosis.
Oh, that's a great example.
I'll be driving a familiar route, and my attention turns inward, entirely focused on a complex problem at work or replaying a conversation from yesterday. The entire visual field of a multi-lane highway moving at 70 miles an hour is relegated to unconscious background processing.
You're practically on autopilot.
Right, but the second brake lights flash brightly in front of me, bam. The spotlight of attention violently snaps back to the visual field. The internal monologue is instantly silenced.
That violent snapping of the spotlight is a perfect example of the brain's priority systems overriding your current focus. Now, because attention is the loudest, most vivid part of our experience, we make a massive fundamental assumption.
We assume that we are our attention.
Yes, we identify entirely with the spotlight. It's incredibly easy to make that assumption. I feel like I'm the one choosing to move the spotlight from my phone to the road or from the road back to the conversation. I feel like the director of the spotlight.
But here's where we find the real turning point in the text. If you observe your own mind for even 60 seconds, you realize you are rarely directing the spotlight.
That is so true.
Attention comes and goes. It wanders off completely on its own. It gets hijacked by a random memory. It drifts away out of boredom. It disappears entirely when you fall into deep, dreamless sleep, and it boots back up when you wake.
And this is the crux of the point. If attention is this constantly moving, flickering, unreliable spotlight that wanders off without your permission, then something else must be aware of the movement itself.
Exactly. Something registers that the spotlight has shifted. The text points out a very practical reality here. If something didn't know that attention had wandered, meditation as a practice wouldn't even exist.
meditation teachers would be entirely unemployed.
Completely out of a job.
Right, because the entire foundational instruction of mindfulness meditation is to focus your spotlight of attention on your breath, notice when it inevitably drifts away to your grocery list, and gently pull it back.
But if you were solely the spotlight, the moment the spotlight moved to the grocery list, you wouldn't know you were distracted.
You would just become the grocery list.
Yes, there would be no perspective from which to recognize the distraction.
Yeah.
The very fact that you can have the realization, oh, I got distracted, my mind wandered, that mathematically implies there's a broader context.
There is a vast, silent field in which the spotlight of attention is moving. And that field is awareness.
Precisely.
I want to pause the analysis for a second and ask you, the listener, to check this mechanism for yourself right now in your own real-time experience.
Yes, try this right now.
Notice where your attention was 30 seconds ago. Was it entirely locked onto my voice? Was it slightly distracted by a physical sensation in your posture? Was your intellect busy judging or agreeing with the point being made?
Just take note of it.
Now, notice where your attention is right now. The spotlight moved. It shifted from the content of the conversation to the internal state of your own mind. Now ask yourself, are you the flickering spotlight that is constantly jumping from thought to sound to sensation? Or are you the dark, silent, unchanging theater in which the spotlight is frantically moving?
To truly prove this difference between the passing contents of the mind and this constant underlying theater of awareness, the text offers a brilliant, highly experiential experiment.
I absolutely love this section.
It's an immediate stress test of the mind that we can conduct right now.
Yes, this is the pink elephant experiment. All right, listener, I'm going to guide you through the exact exercise laid out in the text. It only takes a few seconds. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
For the next 5 seconds, whatever you do not think about a pink elephant. Do not visualize it. Block it out entirely. And especially, do not think about a pink elephant wearing oversized black sunglasses. Go. Okay, what just happened in your theater?
I think it's safe to say we all know the immediate result.
Oh, yeah.
The brain is notoriously rebellious.
Right.
The mind instantly produced the exact imagery you explicitly commanded it to avoid.
It's almost comical how little control we actually have over the spotlight. You issue a direct executive order, do not think of this, and the machinery of the brain immediately projects a massive, high-definition rendering of a sunglass-wearing pink elephant onto the central screen of your mind.
Just pops right up. The text notes that this perfectly illustrates one of consciousness's favorite hobbies, which is ignoring instructions and generating spontaneous, uncontrollable content.
Very true.
But once we stop laughing at the mind's unruliness, we get to what is really Bandra's major conclusion regarding the nature of the self. He pivots to reveal the profound structural underlying point of the exercise.
Yes, let's dissect the actual anatomy of what just happened in your awareness over those last few seconds.
Look at the sequence of events. You heard the prompt. A localized burst of neural activity occurred. The image of the pink elephant spontaneously appeared in your mind.
And it was known. You experienced the image.
Yes. A few seconds later, as we started talking again, the image of the elephant faded away. The thought went. And his departure was also known.
And here is the critical insight. The knowing itself remained completely unchanged.
Exactly.
Okay, let's emphasize that sequence because it is the linchpin of the whole chapter. The thought of the elephant came and was known. The thought went and was known. The knowing remained.
And he points out that the contents of our experiences change continuously, constantly, and chaotically. But the fundamental fact of experiencing does not change at all.
The contents of the spotlight differ wildly from moment to moment. Sometimes it's a pink elephant. Sometimes it's a complex mathematical equation.
Sensations differ too. You step outside into freezing wind, then walk into a heated room.
Memories surge and fade. Moods swing wildly. You can be plunged into the depths of a depressive episode one week and feel soaring, ecstatic joy the next. The data is in perpetual flux.
Yet the underlying presence within which all of this chaotic data occurs appears remarkably constant, remarkably still.
The knower that witnessed the depressant episode last week is the exact same, unmodified knower that witnesses the joy today.
To use a spatial analogy, the furniture in the room is constantly being rearranged, thrown out, and replaced. But the empty space of the room itself is completely unaffected by what kind of furniture is placed inside it.
Now, I have to push back on this empty space or container analogy. If I am just the pristine, untouched space where thoughts appear, why does a passing thought of grief or a sudden spike of anxiety feel so deeply localized, so agonizingly personal?
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, if I'm just the blank theater, why does the movie playing on the screen make me cry?
That is a brilliant question, and
Hmm.
it goes to the heart of why we suffer. The contemplative traditions the text draws upon argue that we suffer through the mechanism of identification.
Identification. Okay, what does that mean in this context?
The spotlight of attention becomes so intensely focused on the feeling of anxiety that consciousness temporarily forgets it is the vast theater and collapses its identity down into the tiny, restricted shape of the anxiety.
Ah, so it shrinks down to the size of the problem.
Exactly. It's like getting so lost in a terrifying movie that your heart races and your palms sweat because you have temporarily forgotten you are sitting safely in a cinema seat.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The practice of mindfulness isn't about stopping the terrifying movie. It's about remembering you are the theater.
So, returning to the core question, what does this all mean for our identity? It means you aren't the passing elephant. You aren't the passing spike of anxiety. You aren't even the fleeting feeling of happiness.
No, you aren't any of those things.
You are the continuous open space where all those things were allowed to appear and disappear.
Countless philosophical and spiritual traditions throughout human history have attempted to articulate this exact realization. As the text lists, various cultures have given it different titles.
Right. Some refer to it simply as pure awareness. Some call it the witness.
In certain Eastern traditions, it is referred to as the ground of being, or pure spirit, or non-dual consciousness.
The nomenclature differs wildly depending on the era and the culture, but the underlying challenge remains exactly the same. How do you adequately describe a phenomenon that is present in every single experience you've ever had, but never ever becomes an experience itself?
And this is where the text brings us face to face with a massive, almost insurmountable wall, which is the limit of human language,
Language fails us here.
completely. If this pure consciousness, this witness, is the most constant and fundamental aspect of our existence, why is it so incredibly difficult, almost paradoxical to talk about?
Because language was biologically and culturally engineered to be a tool of objectification. Language evolved so our ancestors could coordinate action regarding external objects and events in physical space.
Yes, language is built entirely on the architecture of subjects acting upon objects.
The tiger is hiding in the tall grass. The apple is hanging on the high branch. Hand me the sharp flint. Subject, verb, object.
Exactly. Language is designed to take the seamless, unified flow of reality and chop it up into bite-sized, manageable, distinct conceptual pieces.
But awareness is deeply peculiar in this regard. It violently resists being chopped up. It cannot be easily treated as a distinct noun or an object in a sentence without losing its essence.
Because you can't isolate it. You can't put awareness into a test tube and place it on a laboratory table. You can't put it on a scale to weigh its mass.
You can't capture in a photograph. You can't point your finger at it in the way you point your finger at a chair or a car.
And yet, here we arrive at the absolute epistemological paradox. Without this invisible, unpointable awareness, no chair, no car, no test tube would ever be known to exist.
Wow. Yeah, without awareness, there is no language to invent the word chair, no laboratory to measure the mass, no scientific method to study reality. Awareness is the prerequisite for the universe to be known.
This is where the text includes a profoundly impactful quote from the 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer famously opened his magnum opus with the line, "The world is my representation."
That sounds a bit arrogant on the surface, doesn't it?
It does, and that quote is notoriously misunderstood. It's often dismissed as sheer arrogance or wild solipsism.
Yeah, like he's the center of the universe.
Right, but it is crucial to clarify Schopenhauer's exact meaning here. He drew heavily on Immanuel Kant's distinction between the world as it is in itself, the noumena, and the world as it appears to us, the phenomena.
Okay, so Schopenhauer did not mean the world was imaginary, or that he was the only real being in a solipsistic dream.
No, not at all.
He wasn't claiming that if he closed his eyes, the physical chair ceased to exist in physical space.
Exactly. He meant that whatever we can possibly know of reality, whatever we can interact with, measure, or understand, only ever appears through the medium of our consciousness.
So Reality and consciousness are tied together.
The world, as it is experienced by any human being, and the consciousness of that human being are entirely inextricably inseparable. You cannot subtract consciousness from the equation of reality because consciousness is doing the calculating.
This raises an important question, though. It's a question that threatens to break the scientific method entirely.
Uh-oh.
Right. How can we possibly study or define something that isn't an item on the list of existence, but rather the underlying condition that makes the list possible? And Bandra phrases this beautifully in the text. I think this is one of his most elegant formulations.
It's a great line.
He writes, consciousness is not one item on the list of things that exist in the universe. It is the condition that makes the list possible.
It demands a profound, almost dizzying shift in our perspective. Think about a physical piece of paper with a grocery list written on it.
Okay, a grocery list.
You have eggs, milk, bread, apples. For centuries, our sciences and philosophies have been obsessively studying the eggs, the milk, and the bread. We study the chemical composition of the ink. We analyze the curve of the font. We sequence the DNA of the apples.
We study everything on the list.
But consciousness isn't one of the words on the paper. Consciousness is the blank white paper itself. It possesses absolutely none of the characteristics of the ink, the eggs, or the milk. But without the silent presence of the paper, the list simply cannot exist.
It is the ultimate meta-reality. Think about it. You have never, ever experienced anything outside of your awareness, not once in your entire life.
Never.
Every sunset you've ever seen, every symphony you've ever heard, every agonizing heartbreak, every profound dream, every childhood memory, they all appear as temporary phenomena within the open space of consciousness.
Which means when we try to study consciousness, we are dealing with the ultimate meta-phenomenon. We are using consciousness to try and figure out what consciousness is.
And this brings us to a grand crossroads of human thought. If awareness is this ultimate, unpointable, invisible condition, where does it actually come from?
We have hit the great fork in the road of human inquiry.
We really have. The text lays out the two primary opposing possibilities that have dominated history and continue to divide experts today. The first possibility is the mainstream scientific materialist view.
Right, which says awareness is produced entirely by the biological machinery of the brain. The physical meat of the brain, through complex chemical and electrical interactions, somehow generates the invisible, subjective field of consciousness.
This is the dominant paradigm in neuroscience.
Yeah, the assumption is that once a physical, biological network reaches a certain threshold of sufficient complexity, consciousness just sort of turns on like a light bulb.
It is viewed as an evolutionary byproduct, a useful user interface generated by the brain to help the organism survive and navigate the physical world.
But then there's the second possibility, which is gaining traction again in some philosophical circles, and has always been the bedrock of contemplative traditions.
The possibility that awareness is much more fundamental than we imagine, that it isn't a parlor trick produced by the brain, but is perhaps a fundamental, irreducible property of the universe itself.
Much like gravity, mass, or electromagnetism. In this view, whether it's panpsychism or idealism, the brain might function more like a radio receiver tuning into a fundamental field of consciousness, rather than a factory generating it from scratch.
The debate between these two camps, the materialist scientists on one side and the panpsychists, idealists, and mystics on the other, is perhaps the most vigorous debate in modern philosophy of mind.
And as the text pragmatically notes, it is a debate that may continue unresolved for generations, because the very nature of the evidence is subjective.
But I genuinely love where the text takes this next, because it basically cuts through the academic knot. It argues that for your actual lived everyday life, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter which metaphysical theory you prefer to believe.
Exactly. Theory is just more conceptual furniture in the room. What actually transforms your experience is the direct, unmediated noticing of the space itself.
And this is where Bandra deploys these rapid-fire analogies regarding what he calls the impossible circular search. And they're just so striking.
Oh, yes. Lay those out for us.
He points out that the eye sees absolutely everything in the visual field except itself.
Right.
The knife can cut through vegetables, meat, and rope, but it cannot cut its own edge. The digital scale can weigh a feather or a brick, but it cannot weigh its own weight.
And in the exact same structural way, consciousness knows everything in the universe except itself as a definable thing.
This is his ultimate insight regarding the limits of our intellect. The search for the self feels maddeningly circular because the seeker is actively looking for the seeker.
The investigator is trying to investigate the investigator. The question is attempting to turn around and answer itself.
It is an infinite, unresolvable cognitive loop. As we discussed earlier, it is structurally impossible for the biological eye to look at itself without a mirror.
But even if you introduce a mirror, the eye is still only looking at a flattened, reversed reflection, an object that is never looking at the subjective, living reality of the eye itself.
Exactly. When we try to find this self, we are using our intellect. The intellect is a tool specifically evolved to grasp, categorize, and manipulate objects. But we're using a tool designed for objects to try and grasp the ultimate subject.
It is entirely the wrong tool for the job.
It's like trying to measure the temperature of a room with a ruler.
It just makes me marvel at the sheer mind-bending paradox of our everyday existence. The most familiar, intimate, undeniable aspect of our lives, the simple, vibrating fact that we are awake and aware right now, is simultaneously the absolute most mysterious phenomenon in the universe.
It's wild to think about. We mathematically understand the behavior of black holes millions of light years away better than we understand the nature of the silent observer sitting right behind our own eyes.
And perhaps that realization is exactly where philosophy and intellectualizing reach their absolute limit. Philosophy relies entirely on concepts. It relies on the architecture of language, logic, and rational deduction.
But if consciousness is the silent precondition that allows concepts to exist in the first place, you cannot use concepts to understand it. You can't use the ripple to understand the water.
The text suggests that when the intellect finally exhausts itself in this circular search, sooner or later, a completely different possibility appears. Perhaps the ultimate nature of reality cannot be understood solely through concepts.
Right. Perhaps the deepest aspects of existence must be directly, silently realized, rather than intellectually analyzed.
Which represents a radical, fundamental departure from our normal, modern way of operating in the world. I mean, we are rigorously trained from kindergarten to analyze everything. We break things down into smaller parts, we define them, we categorize them, we label them.
But this proposes a paradigm shift, that knowing reality and being reality might not actually be two different things.
That knowing reality and being reality are not entirely different things. That is incredibly heavy. That specific possibility that you can just be the witness without having to think about it has inspired mystics, sages, Zen masters, and contemplatives for thousands of years.
It is the ultimate shift from constant doing and analyzing to simple being.
It is the shift from obsessively analyzing the dust motes caught in the flashlight beam to just quietly resting as the invisible light source.
It is a profoundly quiet, yet deeply disruptive place to end the chapter. It leaves the reader standing right on the precipice of direct, subjective experience, urging them to drop the intellectual debate and just look for themselves.
As we wrap up this incredibly expansive journey today, let's just trace the conceptual arc we've navigated. We started with David Hume and the missing CEO, the startling realization that despite our strongest, most deeply held intuitions, there is no tiny dictator in our heads pulling the psychological levers.
From there, we move through the illusion of corporate continuity, recognizing that our sense of a permanent identity is more of a convenient legal and social label than an underlying physical reality.
We saw that even modern cognitive neuroscience agrees, viewing the physical brain as a vast, decentralized, parallel processing symphony with no singular localized conductor.
We performed the pink elephant experiment, which practically and immediately proved to us that we are not our passing uncontrollable thoughts, but rather the constant unchanging theater where those thoughts momentarily appear.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate limits of human language and the intellect. The realization that awareness is the unpointable condition, the blank page upon which the entire universe is drawn, and that trying to investigate it with thoughts is like a knife futilely trying to cut its own edge.
It leaves us right at the doorstep of the contemplatives, suggesting that ultimately we must be reality rather than try to analyze it.
And before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you transition back into your day. It builds directly on this conclusion regarding analysis versus being.
I'd love to hear where this takes us.
Think about the era we are living in right now. In our modern, hyper-technological age, we are absolutely obsessed with building artificial intelligence.
Oh, every way you look.
Right. We are pouring billions of dollars and endless resources into trying to engineer the ultimate analyzer. We are building machines that can process unimaginable amounts of data, recognize complex patterns, and conceptualize the universe vastly better and faster than the biological human brain ever could.
It's true.
But if this text is right, if the truest, deepest form of understanding reality requires stopping the endless analysis and just being the silent witness, can a machine ever truly know reality? Or is this silent, unobservable, subjective consciousness the one uniquely organic mystery that technology, no matter how advanced, can never replicate? The text suggests that to find the deepest truth, you eventually have to stop looking. Can a machine ever stop looking?
That is a phenomenal, deeply relevant question. I mean, a machine, AI, is built entirely out of the known. It is constructed of physical hardware, lines of code, parameters, and algorithms. It is entirely composed of objects.
Right.
But can an arrangement of objects ever spontaneously generate the invisible, subjective knower? It's something that forces you to entirely reconsider the boundary between the artificial emulation of intelligence and the real presence of awareness.
It really does. It reframes the whole technological race. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. It has been an absolute mind-bending journey into the center of our own
It's
existence.
been a pleasure. As
As you move through the rest of your day, as you answer emails, drive your car, or talk to your family, we encourage you to just play with this new perspective. Keep paying attention to your own flickering spotlight. Notice when it wanders off. Notice the chaotic stream of thoughts coming and going. And maybe, just for a second, see if you can pull back and notice the quiet, unchanging, silent theater where it's all happening. Until next time.